Whenever you're ready.
Sounds good.
See, I can understand volume, which is too many people, but idiocy is a tough one to swallow.
That's not looking ahead. You know?
No, you gotta have some foresight, man, right? You gotta see the game ahead of time, one step ahead. Jeez. Welcome in. It's the Jock Market NBA Strategy Show. Myself and Geoff here with you for the next half hour or so. Mike Awesemo is producing, and we appreciate you hanging with us because we have a juicy, gigantic slate tonight to attack from the Jock Market standpoint. And the beauty here is, of course, we keep telling you, Jock Market has turned the DFS world into the stock market. And the beauty of that specifically means things are far from over once the ball goes up in the air. No lineups locked, anything like that. You can take full advantage, buying low, selling high, and all of the nice little tips that Geoff has for you sprinkled throughout tonight's action. We have our own projections on site. Alex and company have put together not only projections for points, but also a fair IPO price, which is key here from the dollars and cents standpoint. What's happening, brother? Good to be back with you.
Yeah, absolutely. Good to be back. I've always had fun doing this NBA show, some monster slate. Obviously, we got only a short amount of time to do it, but the Jock Market for NBA, it's so fun. I mean, big swings with the lineup changes in NBA every night. Guys, who you might not even think about one night, all of a sudden, getting bid up the next night. So lots to talk about as always, but yeah, going to be a fun one tonight. There's a lot going on, obviously. So.
All right, I love it, man. We also have that promo code above, Awesemo $50 deposit bonus. That means you put in 50 and we'll match that 50 as well. Hit that thumbs up button, the subscribe button, and as our buddy Kickstart has mentioned, the notification bell, so you don't straggle in late. We had an issue there where Kickstart missed the entirety of the Awesemo betting show earlier in the week, Geoff. So we had to remind him, hey, hit that notification bell. And here's Kickstart kicking it right back to me. Be like, see, bell's on here from the jump, Shander, keeping me in check.
That's what you got to do. You got to subscribe. You got to hit all the notifications.
That's
and then,
right.
when one of the million videos we do here at Awesemo come up, you're going to be up there. You'll know what's up. So.
That's it, brother.
Smash all the buttons. That's what I do every day.
Yes,
so.
Yes, exactly right. It's the old hack and slash, right? For the old Sega Genesis, like Alter Beast and shit.
Right.
You just slam as many buttons as humanly possible. All right, let's jump here at the start. Now, we have a couple of big guys here at the top. I was looking at Giannis, and I did find it interesting that there's a full 4-point difference in projections that Alex has on site. And these are free Jock Market NBA DFS and IPO pricing projections that we have for you on Awesemo. But there's a 4-point differential in point projection. There's only about a $3 or so differential in a fair IPO price for Giannis and Steph. I don't know if that leaves maybe $1 or so cushion that you could use if in fact you were looking to get to some Giannis shares ahead of time. Are you looking to get to some Giannis shares ahead of time?
I mean, I definitely don't think it's a bad idea with the projections that we have, just in terms of like the fair IPO price anyways. I mean, it's a big slate. So, whenever there's a big slate, there's obviously also more opportunity out there with, potentially people going overlooked, or just, injury stuff. So, where we haven't projected, and Giannis, I mean, it seems like every time I do this show, he's on the slate and he is like just a little bit undervalued compared to our projections. But I mean, 15-point favorites against Detroit tonight. I mean, I guess the worry is the blowout factor. But again, if a team is blowing out another team, generally their stars go off. So that argument never really holds that much water with me. He's a fine guy to pay up for. I do think on this slate, like there's probably a couple other names I might think about just going down with. And again, because the beauty of Jock Market, I mean, if you want to go big on Giannis, you just buy all the shares of Giannis, but you can definitely spread out your exposure as well. I mean, I think we've got a couple guys popping in the projections. And again, these are free. So go to the site and look at them, as Eitan mentioned. I mean, but Karl Anthony Towns and Jimmy Butler, both, looking really good in the projections as well. We have them at, they're at fair IPO prices above what they're offered over on over on Jock Market, which is nice. The projections looking pretty solid too. Jim, both guys kind of coming off slower nights, but there's a couple of just like kind of just down from the elite names that you can target there. And I mean, those are just two players with really, really good upside, even you just look at their history in the Jock Market. I mean, these guys typically will get you like, top 5 finishes, a couple times every month at the very least. Right. So I like targeting both those guys tonight in the same game.
Yeah. And you mentioned that as far as what we have as the fair IPO price versus what you get the shares at for a player on Jock Market. And that's key, right? As far as determining a play, especially if you're whittling it down to maybe a little bit more of a mid-range guy where you're looking at the difference. That's huge to apply what we've already done on site versus Jock Market, because if it's leverage, if it's value, however we want to phrase it, that's, I think, the difference that we can find, as opposed to people who are just coming on there blindly thinking, oh yeah, let me get a ton of Giannis, and maybe not realizing the difference of price, as you mentioned, for Cat and Butler. What about Steph? And I think Steph's interesting, Geoff, because it kind of opens up the conversation of what to do in game. Sixers are on the end of this long road trip, and they've been beat up, man down or two. I think at this point, they're just trying to get the hell out of there and come back to Philadelphia. The Warriors, on the other hand, are just amazing, right? I mean, it's a 10.5-point line. I don't even think people are flinching at laying that number, which makes sense. They've won 4 straight. They've won 8 at home. I could see this being a scenario where and I'll use what you mentioned as far as if a team is blowing another team out, chances are stars are doing it, where Steph is leading the charge in the first half. They're up by 16, 18, maybe 20 points at the half, which I know it is a lot, but still, this scenario here, Sixers ain't coming back. Maybe that's the time to where you can go up big on Steph ahead of time, banking on a blowout to maybe sell high.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a great point too, with the selling high thing. I mean, sometimes I talk a lot about like trying to buy low in game if a guy gets off to a hot start, but it's such a good point. Like the other thing you do in game is you sell at various points when it's really high. And with these blowout games, potentially, this applies to Giannis too. If the Bucks are going into the fourth quarter up 20, and Giannis has already just like gone off, I mean, you need to start looking to offload shares, because you're probably still going to end up with a good ROI, but like you want to get the maximum return. So always something to remember on Jock Market. You're looking to sell at the peak, you're looking to buy at the bottoms. Steph, and I think that applies more to Steph tonight too, the blowout factor, because Giannis, we know he's a little bit more of their team. He plays different positions. He rebounds more. He is probably going to get you a better chance of having those like garbage time points, not even garbage time, I guess, just peripheral points than Steph. Steph is going to be just probably going off in this game, because I think a lot of what you said about Philly is true. You also have Curry coming off a game against Toronto. They were super aggressive with him last night. They shut him down, but this is just a completely different scenario. The 76ers, I think this is just, I don't want to say they're waving the white flag, but it definitely feels like one of those games, right, where that could potentially happen. I think it's a great bounce back spot for them. And like you said, if they're up big going into the fourth quarter, I would definitely be looking to offload Steph, maybe even like before the fourth quarter if they're up, because it's one of those scenarios where I think the Warriors are more likely to rest Steph. He's not necessarily a guy they're going to play out of position, or they can sort of rest in game. Either he's chucking the ball up, or it's like he's kind of off the court. So averaging 1.51 fantasy points per game this year, super elite player. And again, I think another reason why I'd rather, we have a good projection on Giannis today, but I think I'd rather go with Steph and like one other high price player than pay all my shares for Giannis.
Yeah. So let me follow up with a question about that, where how narrow of a window do you play with? And look, you're definitely playing with fire, right? If it's a narrow window and you miss it. But the point being, let's stay on this game here, because there's a guy in Tobias Harris that I want absolutely no part of, right? Okay. But here's the thing, and because I don't know what to expect, from how much he can play tonight, and also to this whole point about just being at the end of the road trip, this long, exhausting road trip, go back home to Philly. But here's what I'm saying, and maybe Maxey would be a better person to apply here in this, or really anybody in that starting role for the Sixers. You probably have like a 12-minute game time window, Geoff. If they're getting blown out at the half, of that third quarter where they're going to pour everything. But if you don't get out, right, if you don't eject by the end of the third, you're sitting there with shares of a guy's probably going to be on the bench.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's the one thing. Like it's one of those things, like, you know, you talk about Jock market is like the stock exchange. Popular saying in the stock exchange, pigs get slaughtered. Okay. If you're too greedy, if you wait until the end of the third quarter, you might just be stuck with the shares till the end of the night. Now, that may still work out for you in terms of ROI, but it's not going to get you your maximum. So if you are sitting there, it's best to offload them a little bit early. Like if you see the Warriors pouring it on in like 4 minutes into the third quarter and the shares are going up a little bit, it's best to unload it. You want to unload it as the price is still going up rather than when it starts to fade. Because once it starts to fade, the bids get taken and stuff like that, right? So again, this is great strategy talk, and especially in the NBA, these blowout narratives really apply. Tobias Harris, I kind of want to talk about him too. I think it is an interesting spot, but it's super risky. The one thing about Harris is you might be able to get him at a great IPO price because people will be turned off by the question mark, the questionable tag, and just the blowout factor too. Is he going to play? But like, this is a terrible setup for Andre Drummond. This is why I'm kind of interested in Harris. I mean, Drummond can't run up and down the floor with the Warriors all night, right? Yep. Like I don't even know how much he's going to play. This is a better spot for Harris. And I think this applies to Maxey too, but I think Harris is a better player. So if Harris does start, he's definitely a player I wouldn't mind either getting a piece of some way or another. But, you know, it's a little concerning if he's not 100%, do they rest him? So big boomer bust factor, I think, with Harris tonight. It could be a great spot if he's playing the whole game and running up and down the floor in the fourth quarter still, and they keep it semi-close. But yeah, big boomer bust factor. I guess that's the best way to put it.
Yeah, I think, and just kind of keeping it moving here. And again, hit that thumbs up button, please. If you're just popping in, watching what we're doing, appreciate it. See Dave in the chat. Welcome as well. And make sure you're subscribed. The notification bell, Kickstart will tell you all about the bell there. And that promo code we have, Awesemo50, where you put in $50 and we'll match that. You mentioned the large slate here. And we had Cat and Butler at the top, especially compared to the guys right at there with Giannis and Curry at the top there, Durant as well. Is there anybody else that's maybe in the bottom of that top tier that you're super interested in getting to shares ahead of time, even if it means spending up a little bit? You know, Damian Lillard, 38.4 projected Alex has on site for points, but you look at the fair IPO at $7.60, far below, I think, a handful of people. And we've seen kind of this turn for Dame. I want to get to Anthony Davis in a second. I don't know if he necessarily fits that, but if there's anybody kind of in that bottom tier, that bottom of the top tier, part of me, that jumps out as somebody that you want to get to ahead of time, Geoff.
Yeah. So, I mean, you know, for a large slate, we actually don't have a ton of what you call like monster game totals here. But the biggest game total is the one you mentioned. It's the Trailblazers going on the road against the Sacramento Kings, right? So, I mean, I think there's, and again, like it's a 1.5 game spread. It's a really close game. I think Lillard's fine to pay up for. And it kind of goes to that theory on these bigger game slates. Like, I mean, especially in NBA, I mean, I think these are spots where you could be looking to kind of just, you know, like spread it around a little bit. I mean, I guess you could say it's maybe not the best matchup, I guess, De'Aaron Fox, but I mean, I think it's fine. We have him projected like really nicely as well as a pretty good target. So yeah, I could definitely get behind Damian Lillard. Definitely a couple other players though that you can scroll down to. I mean, there's just so much to choose from. I like Valanciunas. It's the player with super good upside. Is coming off a slow night. Yep. I mean, going up against Washington, like just do not defend the middle of the paint very well either. I mean, I think that this is a pretty good spot for Valanciunas to bounce back. You know, where we have him projected as well, kind of similar to Lillard, a little bit better than his fair IPO, a little bit better projections. So both of those players do, you know, we know they can pop off. I always like looking back at players, you know, what they've done for me, not necessarily what they've done lately, but what they can do. Is their upside intact? And Valanciunas is a player you look back at his Jock market, like his rankings and stuff like that. I mean, the dude went on a run where he posted 4 top 5 finishes in like 5 nights earlier in the year. He's cooled off a little bit. He's posted a few bust games, but I think that'll just make him easier to get to tonight and probably a cheap player. And realistically, like Valanciunas is a player too. I think he's a player you either go in on early or you just kind of forget about, because if he gets in foul trouble early or something, like you're not going to pick up cheap shares of him. You're going to be stuck with them if you get them. But at the same time, if he starts hot, like if he gets like, 5 rebounds in the first 5 minutes of a game, you're not getting him at cheap in game. So I'm fine paying up for IPOs in Valanciunas, especially in a good spot like this.
Yeah, it's a great spot. $6.50 we have for his fair IPO price. And then the turnaround there, clearly just under 36 points, especially at the position across the board. I'm curious, and this is kind of all three together here. What do we do with the Lakers, right? You've got 3 different guys. Anthony Davis, I know, is dealing with the injury, probably not looking like, or at least so much in doubt on the back-to-back, right? Probably could sit. Also, LeBron comes back, granted from suspension, but this was also working him back from injury. The one guy that I think jumps out that could, and I think it's all based off those 2 circumstances, especially if AD doesn't play, is Westbrook with a fair IPO price of $6.20, the projection at 35.52. Now, granted, I'm sure that projection changes exponentially in Westbrook's favor if Davis is out, or even if he's playing like James, playing somewhat limited minutes. Westbrook comes off the triple-double. We know the volume and minutes are clearly going to be there. That would be a guy that I would be interested ahead of time, but I don't know if you approach it, maybe just you want to be patient and see how this whole thing plays out.
Yeah, I mean, again, this is part of like just playing NBA, like with betting or anything, right? You've got to guess sometimes on these on these injury news. I mean, if you can make prior investments and they break your way, that's good. And it's not the end of the world. Like if we get in on Westbrook a little early and then the AD news doesn't break in our way, it doesn't necessarily mean Westbrook isn't necessarily going to be have a good night. I mean, it definitely decreases his usage and stuff like that. But I think the slate is so big that like I'm almost just fine fading the Lakers here tonight. I mean, I think if I was going to do it, I would definitely go on Russ and just see how just be fine with however the AD news shook out. Maybe you could leverage it somehow in some way by taking in-game shares of like AD with it or something like that. I don't know, but this just feels like kind of a headache there. I don't necessarily think you need to worry about tonight because there's just too many other good spots. Like we've talked about some of them and some of the strategies you could kind of go on. I think I'd rather be targeting that than necessarily the Lakers. And I don't even know how you'd classify the spot against the Pelicans, or not the Pelicans, excuse me, the Pacers either. So, it's not like the biggest game total. It is supposed to be a close game. Yeah, it's hard for me to make an argument for any of them really, other than Westbrook, maybe just getting in early on.
Does anything on the flip side change? I mean, again, assuming, let's say Davis is out, Sabonis, I'm sure would probably jump up, imagine a lot.
Yeah, that's definitely, I mean, that's kind of actually like the guy I have the most interest in from this game is Sabonis. I mean, such an efficient fantasy player from a points per minute standpoint. We love that. And if AD is out, I mean, I think I'd almost rather play the AD news with Sabonis than Westbrook, because the other thing about Davis is, I mean, they could limit his minutes. He could always get hurt in game, which happens. And you don't necessarily have to worry about usage with Sabonis. Like he's going to play obviously no matter what. So I actually like that move better than targeting the Lakers tonight.
Phoenix on the road early in the slate here against the Cavs, and just looking at what Phoenix has been able to do, just trying to identify. We did this with the Warriors, a really good team that's rolling, taking on a decent to bad team, and Cleveland is not typical in the shitter by any means, but they're not fantastic by any means. Is there a way we can target Phoenix, somebody on Phoenix, maybe a couple of guys on Phoenix ahead of time, or is this maybe an opportunity to counter that with anybody you see on Cleveland?
Yeah, I mean, you have to like some of the Cleveland players, because I mean their bench is just decimated at this point, right? Like Rubio,
it's non-existent.
Yeah, it's not exactly. It's not existent. Osman, if he plays, but realistically, like Ricky Rubio is the guy we should like here. It's just, we have Chris Paul on the slate as well, which is pretty terrible matchup. So I don't know. This is, Cleveland. Rubio is really the only guy. I mean, he's averaging like 1.2 fantasy points per game. We love it. He's going to play a ton because he has to. I think it's fine to take some shares of Ricky Rubio. I mean, we have him rated out pretty solidly as well. He's a player who's definitely like you. Again, you can look back at the Jock market performances. He gets there for us. I mean, in these kind of spots, I'm not even sure if you should worry about the matchup just because the rotation for Cleveland is so ridiculously short right now. So I could definitely see that, maybe a player you even just look at in game and try and buy low, because even if he starts slow, maybe Chris Paul gets pulled and Rubio still has to play the fourth because they don't really have any other options, right? So that's definitely a player I could get on in game. I think for the Suns, I think going with Ayton here is fine. I mean, we've got a pretty good matchup against Cleveland. They don't have a ton of like big guys up front. I think Ayton could certainly get off in the spot. Paul's the guy they might look to rest. Booker is kind of, he could go off almost like Steph Curry, and then you might have to sell early or something. But I think DeAndre Ayton is probably the Sun I would look to target here. I actually haven't looked at his projection on our site, but again, that's something you can go, these free Jock market IPOs on Awesemo. So good reminder about that. But again, on a big slate, I don't think you have to go out of your way to target the Suns tonight. It's not like a big game total. We could see a slower game from Cleveland, but I have a little bit of interest in DeAndre Ayton.
Yeah, I mean, and to be honest with you, just to look at this compared to what we have on site, you're spot on, Geoff, because our projections have Paul and Booker 33.6, 32.6 respectively, and Ayton at 32.09. So there's really no significant dip at all between the two, yet you're down nearly $1 as far as a fair IPO for Paul to Ayton. I mean, 70 cents to be exact, but still there's enough of a gap right there to where you're actually saving some pennies, to be fair, which is the name of the game in Jock market on Ayton versus taking an unnecessary risk on either Paul or Booker. You mentioned the necessary or the need, in fact, if Paul is sitting or just playing less minutes. So not necessarily race to target that game by any means. You mentioned as far as the high total, we talked about that with the Warriors, with the Kings game and the Blazers. Is there another game from a total standpoint that you're looking to attack?
Yeah, I think the Hornets Magic definitely should have some appeal. Again, you got, the Magic are 7-point underdogs. They're at home as well. I mean, we're getting over 220 here. That's nice. And I think, again, I mean, this game does have some interesting pieces we can target, especially for injury. Cole Anthony out tonight for the Magic. Jalen Suggs' usage is up really nicely. He's averaging about a point per minute, fantasy point per minute, or around there about. And, field goal percentage is up. The Hornets aren't really like what you call a great defensive team. I think it's fine. I mean, I think that's like a player you could definitely target in terms of, lower down, looking for some value there. I think that the game spread here is close enough. I think Orlando can definitely keep the game close. And on the other side, I mean, there's definitely some appeal there. I mentioned, or did I mention him? Wait. No, I didn't mention it. I was coming in all the time. So I thought I brought someone up on Charlotte already, but I guess I didn't. Yeah, I mean, so you can go. I mean, LaMelo Ball is the obvious target, but there's a couple different ways you could go. I mean, again, if you're kind of like me, you think the game's gonna stay close. I mean, I don't think Hayward is out of the question here. A player I don't think many people will have on their list tonight or anything like that. Mikal Bridges, obviously too. Miles Bridges is definitely a player you could think about here in this spot, kind of more boomer bust, but I definitely like Bridges in this spot against Orlando. A little bit shorthanded, not like the greatest defensive team up front or anything like that. So this game has appeal for me, maybe a little bit more from the value perspective of Suggs, but I think the Charlotte players could definitely go overlooked here. And again, we have a big game total. They're pretty decent favorites. Like they've got a big implied team total to work off too.
Yeah, $1.70 we have as the fair IPO for Suggs. Do you think this is more of getting to him ahead of time or just waiting to see how game flow and then jumping in?
Yeah, you could wait. I mean, if the IP, the thing is, like, if you put in your bid, just if you really want to get in on him first, you can bid aggressively, but he is a player who I think his minutes they're pretty secure, right? Like
Yep.
it's not a thing of, well, they're going to have to sit him just because of the injury news and stuff like that. So if he does start slow, like he's probably going to see minutes in the back half of this game, regardless of how it goes. So I think you could definitely look to him to get in on him if it just gets bid up too much. I mean, you always want to be semi-conservative with your bids. You want to be aggressive in some spots, but not stupidly aggressive, right? Where you're just throwing all your money at one player. So yeah, if you don't get in on him on the IPO, I think Suggs is definitely a player you could look to get in on in game, because I think his minutes, again, when you're targeting players in games, you want to make sure they're obviously going to be playing in the rest of the game. And I think Suggs is a player we can rely on outside of like some crazy foul trouble.
So we have a bunch of matchups tonight that feature bad teams against good teams. And there might be some opportunity here to take advantage, not only ahead of time, but maybe more importantly in game. The one guy I was looking at, though, maybe to jump on ahead of time and get some shares, because I think the matchup benefits him, especially with the guy going up against maybe not even playing, and that's Christian Wood, where in the Jock market platform may have some great value. I know Vooch is questionable coming back from COVID, so who knows how much he'll even play tonight, if in fact he does, right? Meanwhile, you have a blowout in the making, clearly, with the Bulls in town. I think Wood's going to be out there enough to get some productivity, especially going up against either a backup the entire time or the majority of the time.
Yeah. And again, I mean, that's a good piece of injury news. I mean, Vukovic, obviously, like, good defender, but it changes a lot with him out. Yeah, there is going to be some good garbage time, potentially some good garbage time action from some of these big underdogs tonight. I mean, some of the situations you might see starters get pulled, but I kind of like the spot too for the Houston players. Like, again, Christian Wood, I mean, you don't really have like a huge cast of characters who are going to necessarily just get hot and necessarily steal all the points. I mean, Christian Wood, if Vukovic is out, he's going to be out there. He's obviously going to be in a better spot. Yeah, I don't mind it at all. Even if this game stays close for us for like 3.5 quarters, or even just 3 quarters, I think Wood could produce in that spot. Before we leave too. Oh yeah, Clint, another spot too. I mean, with another game that you might want to total. Again, there's so many games on the slate tonight. We might want to target, excuse me. We haven't talked about the Hawks and Spurs, but just quickly, like Clint Capella in a good spot. Very, very high productivity from a fantasy point per game standpoint. Good matchup against the San Antonio Spurs. And, someone we have projected, I just have them down in my notes, so I wanted to mention that we have projected definitely like with a really good, score to fair dollar IPO price. So Capella, another big man, but I like the Wood call. Some of these big underdogs, their players are going to go off just because of the opportunity and garbage time and stuff like that.
Anybody else on the way out? I was looking again, similar scenario here, Milwaukee, and I know it was a struggle early on at home, but Milwaukee hosting Detroit, maybe Drew Holiday. We have a fair IPO of $1.90 and a projection 26.6 points. Yeah,
absolutely. I mean, again, like big, we're talking like big implied team total here from Milwaukee. So it doesn't all have to be, Giannis centric. And Holiday is probably, I mean, I prefer getting to him rather than Middleton because it'll probably cost you less too. Yep. So yeah, I definitely do not hate that call at all. You could look to some of these other injury spots. I mean, I just have a couple guys written down here. James Johnson with some injuries for the Brooklyn Nets. Ty Jerome for the Thunder with Gilius Alexander out. So couple like cheaper players you could look to if they're available on the Jock market. But I certainly, it's one of those nights too with all the big favorites. Like you don't necessarily have to avoid the good players like on the good teams. So I think it's a good way to end bringing up Drew Holiday. Don't forget that some of these teams have more than one star. Yep. And the Bucks is a great example of that. The Hornets, I mentioned a couple different players other than LaMelo Ball too. Like these are teams in good spots with big implied team totals. So you can definitely attack with even like more than one of their players.
Real quick on the way out, just because Kickstart asks, Birch downgraded to questionable. Any Toronto value plays that you have written down at all? We're on your side of the continent or hemisphere.
Yeah, no kidding. Hey, yeah. I mean, in terms of value, I mean, you could look to, I would look to Chris Boucher then, right? So, yep. that's probably your best bet. And just in terms of a guy who can, make the most of his minutes, like from a fantasy point per minute standpoint. Yeah. With Birch out, I would definitely be looking at Boucher's way. Yeah. Memphis, definitely a good opponent. Yeah. That's probably from a value standpoint. I think you'll see the usage there go up for Siakam too, who again, maybe you just get at a bit better IPO price now because I don't think many people are really like looking to this Toronto Memphis game much. So Siakam, you could just pay up for him too. The opportunity could just be a little bit increased.
Awesome stuff. There you go. Fantasy grind for Geoff on Twitter, at Shander Show for me. Thanks to Mike Awesemo producing. Thanks to Jock Market. Awesemo 50 is the code. You put in 50 and we'll match up to $50 as well. Thanks to everybody out there hanging. Hit that thumbs up button, subscribe. Notification bell helps you as well. And look, we're going to be back in 2 hours talking Jock Market NFL edition.
Oh, yeah.
All right. So get your nap in, brother. I'll see you soon.
See you guys.
See ya.